All right, welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving headfirst into a deeply complex and honestly profoundly human topic, infidelity. But look, we're not here to gossip or cast any moral judgments. Instead, we're going to look at this through a rigorous, science-based lens. We're going to break down the psychological, the biological, and the evolutionary causes of cheating. We'll examine the very real physiological impacts it has on relationships, and most importantly, we're going to map out the evidence-based paths to actual recovery.
So, it all starts with this central, incredibly provocative question, the one that haunts betrayed partners and honestly confuses unfaithful ones alike. Why do we cheat? We so often reduce this to just a simple character flaw or a moral failing. But the research actually shows us that infidelity is a biological and psychological paradox. It's a behavior driven by intricate neurochemical reward circuits, ancient evolutionary imperatives, and these deep-seated attachment needs that, a lot of the time, are operating completely beneath our conscious awareness.
To really ground our exploration, I want to share this powerful insight from relationship expert Esther Perel. She notes that yes, affairs are absolutely an act of betrayal, but they're also an expression of longing and loss. Today, we want to establish a tone of compassion without ever making excuses for the behavior itself. By understanding the actual science, we can map out what experts call the vulnerability architecture of betrayal. Because understanding that architecture isn't about giving anyone a free pass. It's about giving you the actual, practical tools to either prevent it from happening or to heal from it if it already has.
Okay, here is our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll be covering 1. The biology of betrayal, 2. Evolution and mating strategies, 3. The psychology of straying, 4. Emotional versus physical affairs, 5. The trauma of discovery, and finally, 6. The path to recovery. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The biology of betrayal. Let's talk neurochemistry.
Because, as uncomfortable as it might be to admit, the architecture of betrayal is neurochemical long before it's moral. Get a load of this staggering number, 50%. In neuroscientific studies, researchers found that carriers of a very specific gene variant, the DRD4-7R+ gene, actually produce less efficient dopamine receptors. And because their brains just don't process that pleasure chemical as easily, they're left with this constant neurological hunger for intense novelty and stimulation. As a result, carriers of this specific gene are up to 50% more likely to engage in uncommitted sexual behavior. Now, it's absolutely crucial to understand that this is receptor architecture we're talking about, not character. Genetics might load the vulnerability, but as we're going to see, it definitely doesn't mean behavior is completely out of our control. Digging deeper into this, anthropologist Helen Fisher identified this totally fascinating neurochemical paradox when it comes to human love. Essentially, humans have 3 completely independent brain systems governing our pair bonding. You've got your sex drive, which is fueled by testosterone. You've got romantic attraction, driven by dopamine and norepinephrine. And then you have attachment, which is regulated by oxytocin and vasopressin. Now, because these 3 systems operate on entirely separate neural circuits, a person can genuinely love and be deeply attached to their committed partner while simultaneously feeling intense romantic attraction or sexual desire for someone else. So they aren't necessarily lying when they say they love their partner. Their neurochemistry actually backs that up. And this specific neurochemical cocktail leads us to a very real, very dangerous phenomenon known as affair fog. This is not just some poetic metaphor. It is a measurable neurological state. When a new illicit connection starts up, dopamine and norepinephrine just surge, while serotonin drops. This combination literally hijacks the prefrontal cortex, which is the judgment and impulse control center of your brain. The brain essentially gets high on the anticipation of possibility. It totally overrides rational thought and produces a state of cognitive impairment that is, clinically speaking, comparable to being intoxicated.
Section 2. Evolution and mating strategies. Let's look at our ancestral past. So we know the brain gets hijacked, but why on earth are we wired with these conflicting systems in the first place? Well, evolutionary psychologists generally debate 2 primary theories for infidelity. One theory is the dual mating strategy.
This suggests that evolutionary pressures led our ancestors to seek the safety and security of one partner at home, while simultaneously they might have secretly sought out superior genetics from a side partner just to maximize their offspring's chances of survival. On the flip side, we have the mate switching hypothesis. This one suggests infidelity isn't just about genes, it's actually a calculated exit strategy. Basically, if a partner inflicts unanticipated costs or a much better prospective mate suddenly comes along, an affair serves to offset the costs of the current relationship and helps transition to a new mate. Both of these theories really highlight that humans have evolved with these deep biological motivations that constantly clash with modern monogamy.
Moving on to Section 3, the psychology of straying. Let's talk motives and environment.
Because biology? That's really only half the story. If genetics and evolution load the gun, it's our environment, our relationship dynamics, and our attachment history that actually pull the trigger. When couples therapists look at why people stray, they uncover a really complex web of motives. Now, yes, obviously it can be about unmet emotional needs or feeling disconnected at home, but as Esther Perel points out, cheating isn't always about rejecting the partner. Actually, a lot of the time, it's a crisis of self. It's this quest for a lost identity, an intense desire for autonomy, or just a desperate grab for aliveness during a midlife reckoning. Plus, individuals with an anxious attachment style might be unconsciously drawn to the intermittent reinforcement, the unpredictable highs and lows of a secret affair, simply because their brains have learned to equate that unpredictable longing with real love.
So, where do all these psychological vulnerabilities usually find their outlet? Well, prepare yourself, because up to 50% of all affairs begin right in the workplace. And I'll tell you, they almost never start with overt flirtation or some cinematic romance. Nope. Instead, they start with just an innocent Slack message or venting frustrations about a difficult client over lunch. Someone is there, they listen to you, they validate you, and boom, suddenly your brain releases a hit of dopamine and oxytocin. The workplace quietly imitates the exact conditions that make deep connection feel both incredibly natural and highly dangerous.
It turns out the workplace provides the absolute ultimate breeding ground through what we call the 3 Ps. First, proximity. You're physically close to this person every single day. Second, privacy. You have all these built-in excuses for private texts or after-hours chats. And third, permission. The brain so easily rationalizes the behavior because, hey, it's just work. We've all rationalized something that way, right? But in this context, it creates a massive false intimacy loop. It redirects your emotional energy completely away from your primary partner and makes the gradual slide into betrayal incredibly easy to digest and excuse. Which brings us to Section 4, emotional versus physical affairs. This false intimacy loop brings us to a really crucial distinction. Therapist Figs O'Sullivan uses this concept of biological exclusivity. Basically, our attachment circuitry is hardwired to allocate primary resources to one person at a time. When that exclusivity is breached, our nervous system completely panics. But it panics in different ways. In an emotional affair, the core threat is that the primary emotional bond has literally been replaced. The key marker here isn't sex. It's the would you say it in front of your partner test. It triggers this deep neurological fear of, am I enough for you? Now, a physical affair, conversely, violates bodily boundaries through sexual intimacy. That triggers a totally different primal panic. Are you there for me? Both types of affairs catastrophically threaten our primal biological need for secure pair bonding, just from slightly different angles.
And it's really fascinating when you look at the evolutionary gender differences here. Studies show women are often way more distressed by emotional infidelity, fearing the loss of security and resources. Men, on the other hand, are often more distressed by physical infidelity, which is an evolutionary echo of paternity uncertainty. But clinically speaking, therapists see a really powerful nuance. Betrayed men often feel deeply replaced and emasculated by a partner's emotional affair, while women feel viscerally, physically violated by their partner's physical affair. Ultimately, the devastation is universal, even if the exact flavor of the pain varies a bit.
Section 5, the trauma of discovery, the attachment injury.
Look, it is absolutely vital to validate the impact of discovering an affair. We have to frame it not just as a broken promise, but as an acute biological trauma. When infidelity is discovered, the betrayed partner's brain processes this as a massive attachment injury. Remember, adult love is a biological survival imperative, so when that core bond is shattered, the limbic system, our mammalian brain, literally equates this sudden disconnection to a risk of death. If you've ever felt like you were actually going crazy after a betrayal, this is exactly why. You aren't just angry, your nervous system is frantically fighting for its life and its safety. This is why betrayed partners experience real physiological shock, intrusive obsessions, and severe hypervigilance.
Finally, Section 6, the path to recovery. Let's talk about rewiring the brain. Now, this is where there's actually a lot of hope. While biology maps out our vulnerabilities, our brain's neuroplasticity allows us to rebuild trust and repair those attachment injuries, provided we actually follow the science. Healing from infidelity isn't just a matter of having strong willpower. It's a literal biological process of rewiring the brain. Let's look at the actual neurological timeline here. The dopamine circuits that got hooked on the affair partner absolutely have to be starved. With total absence, it takes about 6 to 8 weeks to see a measurable reduction in that dopamine craving. Then, between 3 to 6 months, the brain starts a substantial restructuring of its attachment interface. And it takes a full 6 to 12 months of consistent work for a complete recalibration of the reward system back around the committed partner. You have to be patient, because healing operates strictly on the schedule of receptor upregulation, not just good intentions.
So, how do you actually facilitate all that brain rewiring? Well, experts from the Gottman Institute and Emotionally Focused Therapy have outlined these concrete steps. Step 1. Stop the bleeding. The affair must end entirely, no exceptions, to extinguish that dopamine loop. Step 2. Full transparency is required. You have to remove all secrecy to soothe the betrayed partner's hypervigilant nervous system. Step 3. Both partners really need to understand the vulnerability. You have to map out the exact psychological and biological architecture that led to the affair in the first place so it can't happen again. And finally, step 4, rebuild with proof of work. You must actively reinforce the committed attachment bond through consistent, novel, shared experiences. You literally have to teach the brain that safety and excitement can exist together right at home.
I really want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Infidelity is a profound trauma, and it's fueled by a really complex cocktail of genetics, evolutionary drives, and unmet psychological needs. But understanding this science, it doesn't give us an excuse. It gives us a blueprint. While our biology maps out our vulnerabilities, it is our conscious choices, our transparency, and our commitment to doing the hard work that ultimately define our recovery. So the question is, will this betrayal be the end of your relationship or the painfully honest beginning of a much stronger one? Thank you so much for exploring the science of infidelity with me today on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.